Hey, welcome back to Well, That's Interesting, the Does This Mean We Should Consume Our Younger Counterparts edition. Today is episode 225. Cerebrospinal fluid from young mice improves the memory of older mice. And this is what kids smell like, apparently. My friends, the answer to that question is unfortunately no. Morally, ethically, legally, blah, blah, blah. For those reasons, please, don't eat the youth. We should be eating the rich instead, but that's another episode. Today, in the first half of the show, we are going to nosedive into a wild new study performed by a team of international neuroscientists over at a little place called Stanford University, including Tony Weiss-Correa and Tal Aram, a postdoctoral research fellow. These are the kinds of folks who wake up in the morning, whip up a pot of coffee, yawn, and ask themselves, how in the holy fuck are we going to prevent memory loss in humans as they grow older? Puzzles and Sudoku just aren't enough. For you see, my plump business goose, according to the National Institutes of Health, whose research, grants, and public communications has been frozen by the Trump administration at the time of this recording, by the way, yes, according to this jewel of an independent establishment, multiple MRI studies have shown that our hippocampal volume declines between 75 and 95 years of age, and that the hippocampal shape also shrinks. And just a refresher for all ages here, the hippocampus is one of your many bodily best friends. It's located deep within the brain, between the temples and the ears, and it's named after the Greek word hippocampus with a K, which translates to seahorse. And that's because, you guessed it, the hippocampus is shaped like a seahorse when removed from your head. And I can see it now. Anyway, this cute little fucker has a number of responsibilities, one of which is making sure all your short-term memories are transferred into long-term storage. And since we humans are living longer and are projected to live even longer in the future, the old hippocampal shrinkage and memory loss thing, well, it is and will become a problem. Tony and Tal want to end that problem. So they did what any one of us would do. Infuse spinal fluid from young mice into older mice to see if the older mice had better recall. Now, for many of you out there, this infusion stuff probably sounds like it's straight out of the movie The Substance, and I'm sure that fiction will become reality one day, but again, today, it's just mice. And we need to talk about how these researchers conducted their experiment. We need to talk about the results. And spoiler, it worked. And we definitely need to talk about why it worked. And how one very important molecule in particular, floating around your own cerebrospinal fluid right the fuck now, is key to preventing memory loss and devastating diseases like Alzheimer's. Then after the break, we're moving on from young mice to young people, and from the brain to the nose. Last year, on March 21st, in the journal Communications Chemistry, you know the one, results from another study dropped. Researchers finally characterized the chemical makeup of what I can only call the essence of teen, and they compared it with the smell composition of infants and toddlers. To no one's surprise, they found, from both a qualitative and quantitative standpoint, children's body odor kind of takes a dramatic turn after puberty. To my surprise, there is a wonderful field called Aroma Research, and we're going to meet the aroma researchers behind this study. We're going to dissect the stink of the kids around us, and we will once again be amazed by the human body. No one was harmed, but maybe a few were embarrassed. But honestly, we all go through this. In the meantime, hi, I'm Jill Chacha, and if this is your first time listening, welcome to the flock, my grungy business goose. If you're a long-time listener, I've got an update and a damn treat for you. A lot has happened since 2020, so you'd be forgiven if you forgot about Asian giant hornets, aka murder hornets. Yeah, do you remember those? They're the largest hornet wasp living today, clocking in at 2 goddamn inches in body length, and that size is gargantuan when compared to our bees here in North America. In the fall of 2019, a nest of theirs was discovered on Vancouver Island, Canada, and slowly sightings were popping up in Washington State and along the coast, the west coast of the United States. This was bad fucking news. Massive hornets attack in groups. They decapitate bees, and then they fly away with the bee thoraxes to feed their young. This is what they do. A single hornet can kill a bee every 14 seconds, and a small group of fewer than 50 hornets can kill a colony of tens of thousands of bees. Being that these hornets are an introduced species, native bees have no natural defense. So, like I said, just bad news all around. Until today. Well, as of December of last year anyway, it looks like murder hornets have been officially eradicated from North America. Officials from the Washington State Department of Agriculture and the U.S. Department of Agriculture reported that after 3 years of no confirmed sightings in Washington State or really anywhere else in the country, they're gone. So, how did this happen? Well, it was one hell of a collaborative effort by researchers and the general public. Back in July of 2022, I reported on how male hornets can be lured to their death by enticing them into traps laced with a queen's hormones. But a big chunk of work came from average people just being on the lookout. Quote, "For the next few years, officials, scientists, and the public waged a small-scale war against the hornet. People would spot a potential hornet nest in their neighborhood, call their local entomologist, and once a sighting was confirmed, the scientists would track down the nest and wipe it out. At the peak of its invasion, the scientists killed as many as 1,500 hornets per nest." End quote, from Ed Cara of Gizmodo.com. So people snitched for the bees, and it worked. We just have to worry about the million other things we're doing to them, and they'll be right as rain. To begin, I'm going to ask you to take a nice deep breath, to close your eyes, and then, in all that darkness, please imagine your skull. Come on, go ahead. Don't be shy. Great, perfect. There it is. We're here, looking at our disembodied heads because we're about to meet yet another best friend who is crucial to your existence. I hope you brought a gift. Deep within the creamy center of that lovely brain of yours are ventricles, or extraordinarily small hollow spaces that are lined with a tissue called carotid plexus, which is basically a network of blood vessels and special cells. This factory of sorts is open 24/7, 365 days a year, producing the star of our show, cerebrospinal fluid, or CSF. And the list of things that this elixir does to keep your ass alive is long, so I'm going to need you to have a seat. But please open your eyes first. I don't need you falling downstairs or walking into traffic. My friends, this fluid is the definition of a multitasker. First, as it circulates around the brain and spinal cord, it acts as a protective cushion by absorbing shocks. So if you're clumsy or the punchy type, you're in luck. Second, as it circulates, CSF acts like UPS, picking up needed supplies from your blood and delivering it all to your noggin and central nervous system with a smile. 3, as it's dropping off vitals, CSF cleans up after your overthinking brain cells, removing the waste produced by them. 4, as it does that, it also adds in a little something extra, like water, electrolytes, small proteins, and other nutrients to top you off just to make sure you've got everything you need. And please, put a pin in this, especially the protein part. Now, luckily, you won't run out of this stuff anytime soon. That factory produces a fresh batch of 500 mils or 2 cups of CSF every day. And there's about 150 mils or 5 ounces in the body at any given time, keeping your brain well fed, clean, and protected. Unfortunately, though, for us, as we age, those factory parts do wear down, and they don't produce the same old CSF as they used to. The composition of cerebrospinal fluid changes. According to communications set up by the National Institutes of Health before the freeze, studies show that as people get older, that sweet, sweet CSF may, for example, have higher concentrations of certain proteins, leading to bad shit like inflammation. Or worse, the overall production rate of CSF may decrease, leaving the brain high and dry. This is what brought together a nerdy and concerned international team of scientists from the United States, Germany, Sweden, and the UK. They got together and got to thinking. There just might be a connection between the hippocampus withering down, memory loss, and a change in CSF quality. So, what if older individuals were infused with a younger dose of cerebrospinal fluid? What would happen to the brain? What would happen to the rate of memory recall? Now, I can see your face from here. Your reaction says, Jill, jeez. Jill, this is treading on some vampire QAnon bull honky, and we really don't need that right now. But I see where you're going with this. You're about to dive into an ethical study whose participants were lab mice and not a secret fucking cabal. So please, tell me more. Yes, my brilliant science-based business goose, you are absolutely right. Let's get into it. Tony Weiss-Correa, a neuroscientist and senior author of the study we're swimming in right now, gathered a team from Palo Alto Veterans Institute for Research, Saarland University, University of Gothenburg, and the University College London Queen Square Institute of Neurology, and they all went on to gather some mice. Now, fun fact, your average mouse is considered an adult at 2 months old, and it has a life expectancy of a wee 24 months. So, when you have yourself a pile of 20-month-old mice, girl, you've got yourself a pile of some adorable elderly mice. In this case, the team had some elderly mice, and their experiment began with a little memory conditioning. When presented with a paired light and sound cue, a brief shock was simultaneously administered through the floor. This resulted in the mice learning to stay put or to freeze in place to avoid touching more of the ground. A day later, the cue was repeated, but it only resumed 3 weeks after that. Long story short, on that day, if the seniors froze, the researchers determined that they still remembered the original lesson. So, how well did they perform? Drumroll, please. Thank you in the back. Not great. Not great at all. Oh, man. This quote from an interview with Tony and NPR's John Hamilton says it all. When they're old, they keep forgetting about this. A few days later, they can't remember that they were in a bad environment, end quote. Well, with phase 1 in the book, the number of forgetful mice was recorded, and the experiment moved on to phase 2, which is where we get into substance territory. Believe it or not, extracting and securing viable sufficient amounts of CSF from tiny young mice is truly a difficult process. My friends, finding the right equipment, building the right equipment, and overcoming the technical obstacles faced while trying to harvest nectar from itty-bitty skulls and spines, this could have been an entire podcast episode in itself. As reported by John Hamilton, after a painstaking process that took months, it was Tal Aram, a postdoctoral research fellow in the lab who worked non-stop to solve this issue. Thanks to her, the team was able to collect enough fluid to test whether an infusion of delicious young cerebrospinal fluid could improve recall in those geriatric mice. So, what the fuck happened when they got their hit? Drumroll, please. Thank you again in the back. After CSF was drawn from 3-month-old mice and injected into the brains of 20-month-old mice, quote, the mice that received the CSF froze in motion more often when presented with the cue than those that received a control fluid, suggesting that young CSF helped the older mice remember better. End quote. From the National Institute on Aging website, NIH, I'll say that again, NIH.gov. Well, it worked. It worked. And if you're thinking, wow, that is pretty spectacular, and this is going to change some things, isn't it? If you thought that, you are not alone. Maria Lehtinen, a neuroscientist at Harvard Medical School, wrote a commentary that accompanied the study, basically saying that the findings have created, quote, a whole new era in the search for treatments for Alzheimer's disease and other age-related conditions that affect a person's memory and thinking, end quote. That is a stellar 5-star review right there. But before we all line up to suck down shots of CSF, I have even more good news. For real. I need to tell you why this works. My tasty business goose, in the future, you won't have to drink anything as remotely as nasty as spine juice. After the results, the team turned to RNA sequencing to figure out which genes in the hippocampus were affected by the injection, because it's that there seahorse who's responsible, say it with me now, for moving your short-term memories into long-term storage. The findings were wild. First, researchers saw that the young CSF caused stem cells, called oligodendrocytes, nailed it, or OPCs for short. The young CSF caused them to multiply and mature. And these babies, the OPCs, are so damn important. They produce myelin, which is a waxy, fatty material that insulates all your long, stringy axons. So think of this stuff as the thick coating around internet cables. Without it, your emails can't get to their intended inbox. And in this case, without protective myelin, your thoughts can't reach the next neuron to complete a task. For the adorable forgetful mice, their myelin wore away until this new CSF drove by with the delivery of new proteins to trigger this growth. So, which one was it? I am so glad you asked. After many a clickety-clack calculations, I am honored to introduce you to fibroblast growth factor 17, or FGF17 for short. And honestly, that name sells itself. I could already see the commercial interrupting my time on the tube of you. Anyway, FGF17 is one of the many proteins that triggers the brain's OPCs to produce myelin, but it is looking to be the best option to go with. According to the National Institute on Aging website, the team performed several whopper of a doozy tests focusing on FGF17. And they found that, quote, mice injected with FGF17 performed better on the foot shock memory tests and had greater OPC growth and maturation than those that received a control solution. In contrast, mice treated with a blocker of FGF17 activity performed worse on memory tests than those receiving a control drug. Moreover, the FGF17 blocker inhibited the OPC growth in the presence of young CSF. End quote. That is so fucking thorough. FGF17 might just improve the quality of life of so many people really soon, and quite possibly with just one little pill. No need to substance yourself in a bathroom. If you know, you know. After the break, speaking of bodies changing radically, puberty. If you've been there, then at one point, you really stunk. And me too. As to why and how, well, we now finally have a new study that has explained what is going on behind our pits. It's going to smell like teen spirit in a minute. So please, stay tuned.
I can say to my new Samsung Galaxy S25 Ultra, hey, find a keto-friendly restaurant nearby and text it to Beth and Steve. And it does, without me lifting a finger. So I can get in more squats anywhere I can. 1, 2, 3.
Will that be cash or credit?
Credit. 4.
Galaxy S25 Ultra, the AI companion that does the heavy lifting so you can do you. Get yours at Samsung.com. Compatible with select apps. Requires Google Gemini account. Results may vary based on input. Check responses for accuracy.
This is a message from sponsor Intuit TurboTax. Taxes was getting frustrated by your forms. Now, Taxes is uploading your forms with a snap, and a TurboTax expert will do your taxes for you. One who's backed by the latest tech, which cross-checks millions of data points for absolute accuracy, all of which makes it easy for you to get the most money back, guaranteed. Get an expert now at TurboTax.com. Only available with TurboTax Live Full Service. See guaranteed details at TurboTax.com/guarantees.
And we're back. We are so back. And once upon a time, my friends, Helene Luz, an aroma researcher at the Friedrich Alexander University of Erlangen-Nuremberg in Germany, once conducted a survey, and it included 270 families. The parents of those families admitted that their baby's body odor was much more, let's say, agreeable than that of their teenagers. Now, if you're a parent listening right now who has had a baby and a teen, or that baby grew up to be a teen, you just might be nodding to yourself in silent agreement with them. And if you were a goddamn baby and you grew into a teen, shit, you just might be nodding in agreement as well. And I think I'm going to go as far as to say, if you've ever been near one or the other, you're probably also nodding in agreement. And great, I am so glad we're all on the same page. And I'm even more glad to report that it wasn't imagined. Thanks to Helen, Diana Oswenko, who was obtaining her doctorate during the new study we're about to nosedive into, but is now a researcher at the RISE Research Institutes of Sweden, and several of their Aroma colleagues, we now have a detailed chemical analysis of teen and baby stink, and we can compare the two. Yeah, what a time to be alive. Let's get into it. My friends, during a different time no one wants to remember, July 2021 through May of 2022, body odor samples were obtained from 18 healthy infants, 9 girls and 9 boys under the age of 3, and 18 healthy children post-puberty. Once again, 9 girls and 9 boys, but whose ages ranged from 14 to 18. Now, no needles to spines were involved, and the samples were actually taken in a very gentle manner. The team created pre-treated cotton t-shirts and baby onesies with cotton pads sewn into the armpits. According to the study, titled Body Odor Samples from Infants and Post-Pubertal Children Differ in Their Volatile Profiles, the gang also threw in a second t-shirt, or a onesie, in the room the children were sleeping in for air sampling and as a control during the BO sample period. So yeah, all the kids had to do was sleep overnight wearing their new digs, and the parents, all they had to do was make sure, quote, before the experimental night, post-pubertal children showered with perfume-free shower gel handed out in the experimental kit, end quote. If the parents had a baby, bath time included that gel as well. Now, as for food, because digestion could interfere, and this is a serious study after all, 48 hours prior to the big night, quote, consumption of strongly spiced food, onions, garlic, leek, and other similar vegetables, asparagus, cabbage, and alcohol were to be avoided, end quote, from the study. So, no babies were on a bender during this study. After waking, the 2 garments were placed in separate Ziploc bags, returned to the team within 8 hours, and they were frozen at negative 20 degrees Celsius or negative 4 degrees Fahrenheit. Yum. During the next several days, the scientists got to work, extracting and analyzing the chemical compounds on those pit pads, and boy howdy, the results were kind of shocking. Drum roll, please. Thank you again. Turns out the biochemical composition of those young babies and teens was vastly similar. In fact, quote, the researchers discovered pleasant, citrusy, and soapy-smelling aldehydes in the samples from both age groups, end quote, from Joanna Thompson of scientificamerican.com. Their slight differences, however, is what the stink is all about. The baby samples showed higher levels of the ketone alpha-isomethylioniine, nailed it, which is a fancy way of describing the smell of flowers and soap with a hint of violet, maybe some hopes and fucking dreams and fairy tales in there too. It's just delightful. But the teens, dear God, you might want to have a seat. The pads from the teenagers' armpits had 2 steroids present that were not present in the baby sample. And these are quite something. It's 5A-androst 16N31 and 5A-androst 16N3AOL, which, you guessed it, smells like sweat, urine, musk, and sandalwood. And it gets better. They also had higher levels of 6 carboxylic acids, which give off the air of cheese and goat and wax. And I can see your face from here and your smushed features telling me, ew, but also asking why. Well, great reaction and great question. My squeaky clean business goose, those steroids and acids only show up after puberty. Our lovely sebaceous glands are active just before birth and then mostly go dormant until that very special time of puberty, where they begin to secrete sebum, which is damn necessary to keep newly active bodies cool and protected. Basically, this stuff is an oily, waxy substance that moisturizes our skin and hair. But sebum doesn't work alone. Quote, when the sebaceous glands reactivate, they encounter all sorts of bacteria and bodily substances, like think sweat, that weren't around during the infant and toddler years. These additional agents help break down sebum into the kind of smelly molecules that make up the characteristic teenage musk. Side note, those carboxylic acids. Without sebum, such compounds simply don't form in high concentrations on a baby's skin. Instead, that sweet, milky scent that parents find very pleasant is what lingers. End quote, from Joanna Thompson of Scientific American. So, my friends, getting older stinks. Sometimes. But it really does have its perks too. Thank you for listening, rating, getting older, telling your friends that they smell and why they smell. It's because of their glands and all the things eating on their skin, and that's just the miracle of life. And then tell them about not to worry, because we could just pop some pills, the FGF17. We're just gonna just chug. We're just gonna double fist that stuff, and we're gonna be totally fine. An odiferous thanks to the folks over at Airwave Media, the podcast network to which WTI belongs. If you love this show, and you do, you love the other podcasts in this family, and please stay interesting.